So, Steve Ghikadis, it has been about a year.
About a year. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's too bad. I really wish we lived closer. We talked about that. It'd be really cool because I think we have a lot of things in common. I think that we're very similar people. So I think, being able to hang out with you on a regular would be pretty sweet.
I would love that too. Although I do have to take a little bit of issue because I'm very sure you're a lot nicer. I mean, I know stereotypes are fun and everything, but you're doing nothing to dispel the Canadian politeness thing because you are a very kind, awesome person, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that. And I guess I can't take any credit for it because it comes with the country, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's a birthright. I get guns. Uh, and I don't want them, trust me. No, but seriously though, I read your book. I think it was right around New Year's Eve. Finally, I was able to listen to it on the way to Portland when I was visiting my girlfriend. And I have been wanting to write a review for a while. And every time I sit down, my ADHD ass is like, "Hey, remember this game of Bellatra you never finished and stuff?" So I seriously have not yet, and that is my fault. But yeah, I don't think I've had a chance to tell you yet, but it was awesome, and it did make me tear up more than once on the flight. So, and it made me chuckle quite a bit too. More chuckling than tearing up, which is the ratio I like.
Yeah. The ratio is good on that because, yeah, if it was all just, tears, it probably wouldn't be a good thing. So,
Especially the part.
humor's right.
Oh yeah, well, especially the part where you talk about growing up free thinking and encouraged to think for yourself and to find out your bent and to seek out questions on things. Frankly, that was the opposite of how I was raised. So hearing that kids are raised like that actually gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I always say, like, I count my lucky stars on that because I really was privileged to grow up in that type of environment. I know there's so many people that are not. And a lot of people, because I do volunteer with Recovering from Religion as well. So I hear it all the time. People are like, I really wish I had the opportunity to experience, you know, just life in general and being able to, look into things from an open perspective. And yeah, like hearing your story, it's it's a shock that you're here, but I like that you're here. You know what I mean? It's awesome. I'm really glad you could join us on this side that has the cookies.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, if you had told me about, yeah, I don't know, 15 years ago that I would be here, I would have said you were nuts. But at that point, I was kind of a nut myself, so I've got no way to really complain on that. But yeah, it was a bit of a thing for me getting out because I'm like so many people who deconstructed. I tried everything I could to stay in. So I love how you talk about, finding ways to find the shared values and how you're not a proselytizer. Because even as an atheist, I don't think proselytizing is a good idea either. Because I do agree with Dr. Chrissy Stroop that proselytizing devalues the humanness of people. It rejects their humanity by saying there's something wrong with you there and you must think like me. At the same time, though, I also see the harm that unbridled, high control religion can do. So I do make myself at least available to those who want to talk. So it's a fine line, I know, but I love that you actively go out and you um, try to find those shared values and people to work with.
For sure. And I think you're really onto something there because the whole proselytization thing, it's like, we talk about the backfire effect, right? So it's like if you're pushing your type of, beliefs on anyone or lack of beliefs, it's really going to cause people to just double down on their own situation, right? So if you can kind of work it into conversations and, ask Socratic questions like street epistemology, right? Like allowing people to maybe evaluate things that they maybe never thought of before. And I think that that's more how you can influence people to think a bit more about where it is they're coming from and why. And then at that point, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I don't believe this stuff, or maybe I do think about it in a different way than my pastor does, or something like that, right?
Yeah. Like the story you told about the guy who was very displeased that you were wearing a shirt saying that there was no hell. Like that is what, because I was just like, yeah, I would have been that guy once upon a time. Been like, what do you mean? Yeah, there's no hell. And there's got to be a hell because there has to be a hell. And I haven't thought about it much beyond that. So I like how you did engage him to the point where you diffused the conversation very nicely, but you also gave him a lot to think about. So who knows? But yeah, he probably stewed on that one for a while. Who knows? He might still be up, or he might be on this side today. We don't know.
Yeah, you never know. But that's the funny thing, because I said to him, what does the Bible say about hell? And he's like, I don't know. I haven't read it. So now it's like, whenever someone asks me about my book, I just say, I don't know. I haven't read it, because, I like to use that line. So I just think it's so funny. I think it's the best thing you ever, you come at something very adamantly, and then they're like, well, what do you think about this? I don't know. I haven't read it. It's just so funny.
Yeah, but it's hilarious to your reply. Like, I haven't read it. I just wrote it for your book. I'm sure after editing and everything, you're like, how have I actually read it though? Yeah.
Well, that is true, because I did have an editor who basically was like, this part fits and this part doesn't, so maybe smooth this over, and here, I'll take this suggestion and things like that, right? So there was a lot of things afterwards. I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I need to reword it again, because it's almost like the meaning of this sentence or this paragraph has changed. And I'm like, you know what? I really didn't like the edits, so I'm going to take this back and rework it into what I originally had. So writing a book is a big undertaking, because you just think, I can put words on paper and it's going to be good. And
I know for a fact I can't do that.
But yeah, like, I mean, yeah, there was a point where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, because the editor was like, you know what, like, this, I don't know if this is going to work out. And I'm like, oh, man, like, I really don't want to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. And that's really what I had to do, because I had a whole bunch of blogs online and like blog entries. And that's what I did. I just literally put the blog entries together, and she's like, you can't just do that. Like, there has to be a unifying message throughout the whole thing. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm not an author then, but I ended up going back.
I felt like there was.
Yes. Well, now there is.
I mean,
but like, yeah, no, now there is. But like, when I originally had written the book, it was basically just blogs I had put together, and the editor was like, no, this is, you need to actually find some kind of unifying message. So that's when this iteration of the book came about. But it did take a bit of time. And I even at one point said, maybe I'm not going to do this. And then I'm like, no, I think I need to, because I think the word needs to get out that there are people out there that don't have the same beliefs, but we're also living a moral life. And I think the book is kind of like an anecdotal telling of, how to live this life, and not just slamming you in the face with it, not saying like, hey, you have to do this, but just if you know somebody who is a humanist or an atheist or whatever, this is probably the life that they're living.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. So what would be, like, looking back, the one thing that you would change about the book now as it stands, or you would probably like to update? And I guess the follow-up to that is, when can we expect the next book?
Yeah, I mean, as you were asking this question, I'm thinking like, okay, well, I am probably going to update some things in the next book. The next book is probably going to come out next year, but I can't say for sure, because it is taking a bit of time. So what happens is, when you're writing, you have a whole bunch of ideas, and you put a bunch of ideas together. Well, I mean, this is my outlook on it, right? So I put all these ideas together, and then I go, okay, I'm going to write a chapter on this now, and I'll just write a chapter, and I'll be like, okay, how is this going to fit in with something else? And just, it's a long process, right? So it's almost like, when you look up on the board of those, spy thrillers or something, and they have all the different connections and stuff, and it's like, where is this going to fit, and how is this going to fit? So that's the way I feel when I'm doing this. But basically, I would have changed. And so I guess the word I was looking for in the book was compatibilism, but I actually went with soft determinism, because I didn't know that there was actually a term for compatibilism, which is really strange. But like, when I was like racking my brain to say, like, how am I going to say that, like, I believe in a deterministic universe, but I also feel like we have like minuscule abilities to make choices. And I don't even know if that's true, because I really don't understand the whole deterministic universe thing. But at the same time, I also want people to be held accountable for their actions. So that's basically what I'm trying to say. So I think that when I was writing that, I was thinking in my mind compatibilism, which is, I think that there is a minute amount of free will, just enough to basically say, I'm not going to be a dick, right? But again, I don't understand the whole thing, because it's way beyond my capacity to understand.
Or maybe I'll say, yeah. Well, just throwing it out there though, like the idea of that, I feel like in that context, those choices are limited to like the person's experience, what they know to be ethical and not. and what they, through nature or nurture, just have a bent towards. Like there is free will, but there are limiting factors to that free will.
Right. And I think, yeah, and I think that that's the case, because like movies like Minority Report, it really freaks me out to think that like, okay, there could be at some point a spot where they can measure your brain activity and say, okay, you're going to commit this crime, so we're going to put you in jail anyway. And I just feel like that kind of limits the experience as a human, right? Like I don't know how else to explain it, but just to me, it doesn't make any sense that everything is determined from day one. But again, I don't know. I don't know the psychology or the science behind it. So,
Oh, me neither. I was homeschooled in the cult. That's why it seems to remember that like if I fuck up math or anything, I'm like, well, I was homeschooled in a cult, so yeah, now. And you immediately get the, oh, I'm kidding. That I don't use that excuse for everything, but yeah, it does come in handy. Like when people ask me, like, well, what about the second law of thermodynamics as it relates to an expanding universe? And I'm just like, I too know some of those words.
well, and the funny thing is that people always think that we need to have some kind of scientific theory to back up our lack of belief, and really, we just don't find sufficient evidence to believe in the supernatural. That's pretty much it.
The weirdest thing, one thing that helped me the most in my personal deconstruction on that note was taking a process improvement course. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like, Lean Six Sigma and all that sort of thing. Basically, yeah, it was something that I was kind of thrown into in my job and I ended up liking it. But it uses essentially the scientific method to test statistically how things are performing and where we can improve things and where the root causes of our misperformance are. And basically trying to continuously improve. And, they went into a deep dive on the scientific method and how to do, testing and, p-value and alpha value and stuff like that, basically your confidence level. And, all that aside, they were just like, look, the way we see it, if you are 95% confident in the results of your test, then that's enough to go on. And of course, everybody in the room was just like, well, how can you get to 100% confidence? And they were like, you can't. There's always the chance that there is some outside thing that we haven't accounted for, or, there is always a chance that you could be wrong. But we have found that 95% confidence is enough to go on in most cases. And of course, everybody there is just thinking, okay, that's a weird business term, but it opened up a door in my head. I was just like, you mean that all human progress that we've seen up to this point, especially in our modern world, has been based off the idea if we're 95% confident in this, we can move forward? That's interesting because I was raised to believe that you have eternal life and you have the truth. And, da, 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 da. And it was very freeing to me to think like, yeah, but we make progress by, going for it when we're confident enough. So it was very interesting to me.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up the whole thing that we talked about kind of on Facebook the one day about agnosticism and whether or not that's even legitimate, because everyone's agnostic when it comes to supernatural. Like, like there's so many different things about that. Like theism and atheism, you don't need to qualify it with Gnostic or agnostic because everybody's.
Yep. Well, and yeah, that's the thing that has always kind of bothered me about the whole agnostic thing. And yeah, I agree. Everyone is agnostic to a particular point, but that is it's just weird that we have to really pinpoint that when it comes to the God question when we don't really do it with anything else. It's like because Ray Comfort, you've heard him talk, I'm sure, and he says things like, I can make any atheist an agnostic in 5 minutes, and I'm like, yeah, but did you really do anything though? Like that's a trick to say like, oh, I'm bringing them over to my side, which first of all, proselytizing, fuck that. But second of all, it just seems so unnecessary to even bring that up. It's like, yes, I don't have the information on the entire universe where I can definitely say that a God doesn't exist, much in the same way I can't say that an invisible dragon exists or anything like that. I just don't see why that seems to be a victory among so many people who proselytize. But that's just my own little beef,
Yeah, and I don't mind people calling themselves agnostic, but technically they're atheists because if you don't know about a deity or the existence of a deity, then therefore you can't believe in it. So therefore you would be an atheist just by default. But again, I'm not going to tell people how to label themselves.
Oh yeah, that's true. And at the end of the day, the label you select for yourself, that's very viable. Most of my friends, who would say that they're agnostic atheists and all that, I 100% support them in saying so. What I don't like is a theist saying, "Well, you're really just agnostic," and I'm like, "Congratulations, you described humanity." Like
Exactly.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and there was a mudcast for a little while called Everyone's Agnostic, which was really good. It was Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley. And that was a really good podcast for quite a few years. I listened to that. And there's a lot of guests on there that were, that helped me along the way in trying to, define what I think I would describe myself as. So technically, I do say I'm an agnostic atheist for a lot of times just so I can get the label. It's helpful for people to understand exactly where I'm coming from. But then I say that's what I don't believe, and then what I do believe is.
And refresh my memory a bit. How did you get involved in like active secular activism and the promotion of
Yeah,
that?
that's a really good question. I'm gonna try and keep it short, but basically, I was, as we talked about, raised as a free thinker, and I would consider myself to be an apatheist, somebody who didn't care about religion because it just wasn't a thing in my life. But I was really interested in like anthropology and religion from like the outsider perspective looking in. So I experienced a lot of different people along the way and cultures and religions. And I was joining the Freemasons as a promise to my grandfather. And when I went through the whole process, and this is all online, so I'm not giving away any secrets here, but basically they put a bag over your head, bring you through a room, and they put a sword to your chest and they say, "How do you come?" And someone whispers in your ear, "In peace." So I'm like, "In peace?" Cool. They bring the sword down, they bring you in, they kneel you at the altar, they say, "Who do you put your faith in?" And then they say, someone whispers in your ear, "In God." So I'm like, "In God?" with a question mark. And they're like, "Yeah, and they take you through a whole series of different biblical stories, and it was all kind of acted out in play form. So it was cool. I got to see, the Bible from the way that I can learn, which is visual, right? So I got to see all that, which was cool. I stayed in it way longer than I should have because I didn't believe any of the stories, but I stayed there and I thought it was cool. At the same time, I met my wife, who was a Christian, and I just thought, okay, she's Christian, she must be a great person because that's what you always hear. You always hear Christians are great people, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. And religion never really came up until we were, getting married and stuff. And then like the ceremony was very religious. And then after the ceremony at the reception, her parents said, "We're so happy she met a man who believes the exact same thing she does." And I'm like, ooh, okay, well, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble here, but I kind of feel like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I kind of felt like that anyway, because I was sitting in church beside her and stuff like that. And it was just like, I don't believe this stuff, but I'm going to do the actions and the pass the plating and the plate and all that stuff. And then I kept getting called by like the minister to like, "Hey, can you guys come and light the Christ candle and pass the plate around?" And I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. So I kind of got to the point where I was kind of more angry at myself than anybody else for duping people into thinking I was something I wasn't. So I really lashed out and started ridiculing people's beliefs and became a very angry atheist at that time. And then, it took a long time for me to kind of say, okay, I really need to rebuild these bridges that I had burned here because I was actually putting myself in a really bad position and putting everybody else in these like awkward positions. So I researched people like Anthony Magnabosco, who we got to meet at NanoCon last year, which was really cool. And he wrote the foreword to my book, so that was really cool. And so I reached out to him. I reached out to Dale McGowan, just people that had been in these experiences where they had been talking to people and trying to find common ground of some sort. And, they both helped me immensely through this. And I was able to rebuild those bridges. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm in a solid foundation, I had built a solid foundation of where I'm at now, and I can have these conversations. I'm going to start reaching out to volunteer organizations to see who can use the help. So then I found Recovering from Religion. And then so I started volunteering with them on the helpline and then quickly moved up within the leadership. So right now I'm the director emeritus, which means I am a director forever, but it's more of a joke. But I've been through different director roles with them. I still volunteer with them as an ambassador. So when I go to things like NanoCon or BajaCon or the World Humanist Congress, which is coming up in August, first weekend in August or second weekend in August. Anyway, I'll be tabling for Recovering from Religion. So it's one of those organizations that I when I first started doing activism, that's who I went with. So they also teach in their training active listening and Socratic questioning and things like that. So just I got a really deep dive into that stuff, and that's basically what I've been using in my activism since day one. Basically, once I got over that hurdle of being an angry atheist. Sorry, that's a long story, but that's basically the story.
Hey, we all have one. Yeah, it's funny though. I was thinking when you said that her parents said, it's great that she met a guy who believes like she does. I mean, no, you didn't share the God belief, but just from what I understand of your wife in the book, like y'all at least shared the humanism, like from the jump. You agreed where it really counted. So in a way, they were right.
Yeah. I think it was there was a preamble there about religion and then God and then Jesus and stuff, and then they said that. So it was kind of like like I feel like okay, now I have to fit into this mold, or I have to break out of it, one or the other. And at that point, I'm like, I need to make a conscious choice here to be who I am, because if not, I'm going to bubble over and explode at some point.
Yeah. It just kind of blows my mind to ever think about you as an angry atheist. I know we all have our moments, I mean, hell, I have that phase too, and I still feel like I reserve it for the systems and the people who should know better, you know? Like, I feel like when you get to a certain point in certain beliefs, at that point, you're just exploiting, It's like, because it beats working for
Yeah.
you.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And my persona is I want to be a bridge builder. I want to be someone who helps connect point A to point B, but there are times where people will test that limit. And I always say in my presentations, you don't have to be a doormat for people, right? If there's people that are causing legitimate harm either to themselves or to others, we have to step in and do something, right? And there are times, you'll notice, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there's times online where I will go a little bit further than being a bridge builder to just basically say, hey, you know what? This is beyond what I'm able to accept, from your behavior type thing. And more take it from a disappointed dad perspective, like, hey, I thought you were better than this, and that seems to work a lot, a lot for getting people to maybe just even take a look in the mirror and go, yeah, you know what, maybe I was being a dick.
Yeah. Well, so, basically, your guidance is, don't be a dick, don't be a doormat. So anywhere between the two days you should be. Yeah. But be a bridge builder more than anything. Be a third D. So 3D. Uh, um, but yeah, no, I get that because like, you know, for me, I felt like when I was deconstructing, it kind of helped to get like both barrels. Like there were people like yourself who gave me way more patience and time of day and explained things that I deserved. Cause I had a lot of bad ideas to like deconstruct, and it took me several years, and hell, it's still a lifelong process. Like I run into shit every day. I'm like, wow, I thought I was past that, but here we are. So, yeah, it's like, but at the same time, every once in a while, it helped me, like, when I genuinely deserved it, to have people be like, "Hey, you're being a dick," or "That's a stupid thing to push for," maybe don't do that. And, it just felt to me like, there were both both approaches worked in context at different times. So I feel like having that ability to enforce the boundaries while still maintaining your basic kindness is important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that they kind of call that humanist grace, where it's like you can give someone the grace to be, a little bit rough around the edges because, we're all human. And also, respecting someone's dignity and, sharing empathy and compassion, just trying to be there for somebody, even if they're in a bad place. Trying to see past that and say, you know what, this person is a human like me, and all we have is each other. So I have to be here for this person.
I saw that a lot this past week. I don't know if you caught it, but unfortunately, a friend of mine who's been very active in the space for trying to prevent homeschool abuse, he died by his own hand last week, which was, um, a huge tragedy for a lot of us, especially when we're dealing with, some other issues are coming up in the homeschool space right now. And he left behind the kind of note you would expect from someone who's reached that point in their life. It was sad. You could hear the hurt, and you could also hear especially if you weren't like intimately familiar with some of those situations where it felt like he was lashing out finally at some of the people in his life that, has sustained him to that point. And, it, I don't know if you know this, but the internet could be, not very humanist graceful. They like, yeah, like people immediately started like jumping in to offer their opinions about the dote and everything, while forgetting like, hey guys, there's still a human being here that reached the end of the rope. And I'm not saying that we as a community failed him, although I think there's room for that discussion, but there has been a failure of a lot of things leading up to this point, including the fact that he had to undergo that abuse in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are justified in lashing out if you have been wronged, right? Like there's definitely, especially, um, you know, trauma inflicted upon you, whether it's mental or physical. Like, I mean, it's absolutely unacceptable for people to impose that on others. So I think that you are justified in being angry and being, and lashing out, like we said, because it's just, there's some injustices that you just can't let slip by. Right.
Well, and also too, like my therapist has said, anger lets you know that something needs attention, lets you know that something's wrong. It's like pain, you know, and and it's okay to deal with that. But I sometimes feel that we, on the outside, looking in at a person's actions and stuff, we can sometimes be a little quick to judge without taking into account the context of like the trauma and the place where the person is working from, which I kind of felt like happened quite a bit this past week with my late friend. So, and by the way, this is also a friend too who, even though I supported his work, we did not agree on a lot of things. Like he still kept to a degree of theism. He was trying to find a theological um answer to abuse of children and stuff like that. And I thought, honestly, I feel like there's better things that we could dedicate our time to. But, he did make a difference. And yeah, it's just this past week, I've really been struggling with the idea of like, how to deal with people who also, from a degree, speak from their own trauma. Like they're reading that into what he left behind. But at the same time, like not leaning into the idea of, well, that one thing defined every single thing about this very complicated person, and the grief associated is complicated with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is anything I'm saying making sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And I think, religion is also a spectrum. Like religious belief is a spectrum, right? And people are on a different path from others. So you never really know where someone is on their path. And people who use religious justification to say, oh yeah, this could be, this or whatever. I try and give people grace in that as well, because I'm like, you know what, maybe they're still in their deconstruction phase, or maybe they just haven't thought of it as being a natural element to the universe, right? Like there's a lot of things that I feel it's hard to be someone on the outside looking in and understanding. And I think that that's something I'm trying to develop for my next book, which I've been talking about in my presentations, is what I call the three mutuals, or the mutual triangle. So the first one is called mutual understanding. And I think that if you can ask Socratic questions to get at the heart of where someone's coming from, then you can develop an understanding of where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with it. So like you said, your friend, you didn't agree on a lot of the things, but there was like a baseline understanding of, you understood where he was coming from. And I think that the key word in this all being mutual, right? If they can understand where you're coming from and you can understand where they're coming from, that's kind of like the basis for having that relationship. And then the next steps, right? The next step would be the mutual acceptance. So you can understand why someone believes what they believe, but do you accept that, right? So like someone could say, I believe that there's a heaven because I really want to see my cousin again, right? And you can be like, oh, okay, I totally understand where you're coming from. I understand that pain and that, that yearning to see that family member again. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And then they can understand, they can look at you and say, well, I know that you don't believe in a deity because you don't see any supernatural evidence, or don't see sufficient evidence for the supernatural. So they come from that mutual understanding, and then they can accept that. And then the last step would be the mutual respect. And that's the hardest one to develop, because being able to respect somebody even if you completely disagree with what it is that they're saying. And I think drawing the line on harm again, right? Harm is never going to be an acceptable thing. I'm never going to respect somebody who's causing harm. But there are certain aspects of someone's belief that could make them say certain things or do certain things that I don't agree with, but at the same time, I can respect the person. And then maybe if you have that mutual respect between you and that person, that gives you the ability to maybe mention some things, even in a lighthearted way, to say, hey, you know what? The thing that you're doing over here, I don't know if I really agree with that. Why do you do this? Right. And it just gives you a jump off point for the next part of the conversation. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, it does, honestly. And, so much of what you're saying too, really resonated with me when you're talking like, because I have a lot of friends who kind of have a foot in, foot out of the of the whole God question, but they're like, yeah, I'm still stuck on the whole, I would love to see my parents or my relatives again. And, and that's something too that I've always thought about. Me personally, and this is just in Chad's perfect world, we wouldn't have the religion problem to deal with in the first place. I feel like if it disappeared tomorrow, there would be a net positive. But I also know that it's not going to happen in my lifetime because, these beliefs and these patterns have been in place since pretty much the dawn of man and our abstract thought. So, like you said, there's three things that I've always required. When in my friendships, if I have like a religious friend, there's some understandings that, I'd love to come to, and they don't have to be perfect on these, but at least it needs to follow this guideline. If we're going to be close, number one, you're genuinely doing it because it's the way that works for you to be your best self, because for some reason, well, a lot of people have different methods for keeping themselves in certain boundaries they set for themselves. And I don't see religion in of itself being the worst way to do so. But second of all, no proselytizing, because as I've said, the proselytizing devalues people's humanity. But the third is absolutely do no harm, especially to vulnerable people. A lot of religions inherently do that. And I do have, friends who abide by like all three of those things, and I'm happy to call them close friends and in many cases coworkers and reducing harm. But yeah, it's getting fewer and far between. And I found more people than I expected, but the vast majority of people who still want to see harm committed in the name of religion or who, want to try to convert everyone is still very discouraging.
yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be physical harm either. There's a lot of, mental harm, and there's a lot of sociological harm too, right? Like by saying that certain people can't be in the country and things like that, right? And it's almost like you want to say, what would Jesus do in this situation? You know what I mean? Because some of the people that are actually like claiming to have Jesus as their personal Lord and Savior are the ones saying the opposite of what he would say in these certain scenarios. So
It's yeah, it's just it's rough for me because I still think back to how I was when I was deconstructing and the number of things I still desperately wanted to hold on to and the number of things that I had to finally, kind of kicking and screaming, give up and be like, you know what? I should really question that about what I believe too. And I understand like people who are genuinely trying to, you know, understand their beliefs better. What but, it's getting harder and harder for me to, like, see the people who are in that position and the people who are striving to become the upper tiers of harmful religion. Right now, if you're in fundamentalist evangelicalism, it's a pretty good gig. You, get a lot of power with it and you get a lot of money. But, it's just I just, with the amount of people that I've seen who have been celebrating harm so much lately, it has been discouraging, but it has, in a weird way, made my connections with the people who don't want to cause harm with their beliefs a lot more solid.
yeah, for sure. And I do think that situations in history that have been similar, where there's a lot of hate speech and things like that happening, you do see, subgroups will start rising up to combat that. and then we kind of go through like a period of enlightenment again. So I do feel like we're kind of on the cusp of that enlightenment again, and I feel like there's going to be like a almost like a humanist revolution where empathy and compassion is going to win out over these harmful and hateful ideas. So I'm just, holding my breath until that happens. And going back to what you said before about, the dawn of man and abstract thought, like there's been so many different belief systems throughout, our history that now we consider as mythology, right? So it's like there's going to be a point, and I'm kind of seeing the trends here towards, the current systems becoming mythology eventually. But then, what's going to happen is that there's just going to be a new a new religion that's going to take forth or come forth, or more religions in the future. So there's nothing that we can do that it's going to prevent people from wanting to live forever, wanting to find answers to, where life came from, where the universe came from, things like that. I mean, I'm comfortable not knowing. It'd be cool to know, but I realistically think, we probably will never have the answers to that, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about, another religion will come out. It brought to mind what one of my favorite magicians, Brian Brushwood, usually says. He has a podcast about con artists. It's called World's Greatest Con. And he always starts each episode by saying, cons don't fool us because we're stupid. They fool us because we're human. And there is just something comforting about knowing that, when it comes to, it's scary, don't get me wrong, when it comes to knowing that there are shortcuts that certain leaders and certain ideas can take through our critical thinking, that's something to be watchful for, but it's also comforting to know that, hey, there are some people who genuinely don't know any better. And hopefully by our presence being out there saying, hey, we're here if you want to talk. I feel like that's ultimately going to be more powerful than a lot of the, harsh rhetoric. But at the same time, it's like, it's really hard not to lash out when you're seeing so much harm being perpetuated. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I totally get that. And I think, like what you just said, we're providing like a safe landing for them, right? Like if people are going to question, or people are going to, get to the point where they're like, I don't believe this stuff anymore, at least we're here to help them pick up the pieces. And we can't offer them anything like eternity. Like we can't say, hey, you're going to live forever and this is going to be great. But we can say, hey, you're going to live in the here and now, and this is how we can make it good in the here and now, right?
yeah. And like I said, recovering from religion, I think, has done a lot to be that for people, like self included. And it was not something I was aware of when I was deconstructing. And I really wish I'd had it as a resource, because it would have probably helped me speed run it a little better. But, I do appreciate that there are, people like yourself and organizations that are there for those folks when they inevitably do need that landing space.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool because, it's one big organization, but there's so many different moving parts to it. There's so many different things. There's, there's the helpline, but there's also like the support groups. And there's also like the RFRX talks that you did one. Actually, you did one right before I did one. So that was kind of cool. And we were both on a poster together, which is awesome. It's probably the closest we've been in a year.
Yeah.
But
I need to travel more.
you need to come to Canada. Come to Canada, and then we'll go to Green Gables together on PEI. That would be really cool.
I'm okay with that.
And then maybe
Let me see if I can send an email to me and follows too. But like, hey, you want to do something hilarious?
hey, can we recreate this photo that we had from years ago? That would be really cool. But yeah, it's like, this organization, and then they have the sister organization, which is the Secular Therapy Project. So enabling people to find therapists that are not going to shove religion down their throat, right? Like just all these different, I guess, fingers from the organization are all kind of acting together to make a safe landing for people. And it's an incredible thing to experience.
Oh, it's much needed. And like I said, I can't thank the people enough who are willing to put their time and effort out there to, be that safe place and be that safe landing space, and to, promote the better side of humanism and secularism out there. Like, you have a lot of my admiration. Let's just say I admire the helpers, and you're definitely one of them.
I appreciate that. You're doing your part as well, right? So we're all kind of working together to make the world a better place.